Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, and we're coming to you from the edge of the Great Red Divide to discuss the impeachment hearings, day one.
Wow, there is so much to unpack. Now, the testimony wasn't particularly riveting, but there were key elements that will be really important in the upcoming weeks.
And since there is so much to talk about, we're going to try to condense it down to what you really need to know in a half an hour.
Absolutely, because that's it. Spend a half an hour with us.
Yes.
You'll get everything you need to know.
Get everything you need to know.
So yesterday, the two witnesses in the committee hearings were George Kent and Bill Taylor.
And the important thing to remember about them is that they've served under multiple presidents. They are career diplomats. They are people who were both appointed by Republicans, one under H.W. Bush and the other under W. Bush. So they've served multiple presidents, multiple philosophies, but with the philosophy maintaining diplomacy.
Here's the biggest thing that I wish more people got from that was these people have worked their entire careers to advance the security and and the policy of the United States.
Right.
The foreign policy of the United States, not the foreign policy of a particular person.
Right, because diplomacy has to be above our politics here in the States. It has to be consistent. It has to be maintain a purpose. And these men have worked toward the purpose, toward the goal for decades.
So we need to start with that as our basic understanding. Mm-hmm. And I think that when the American people really understand what the difference is between a president's philosophy and a
policy, U.S.
policy created by multiple agencies within the government as best practices, there's a big disconnect there.
And especially involving Ukraine, because Ukraine used to be part of the USSR, which is was like Russia had collected all these countries after World War II. And they put up something, we just had the 30th anniversary of the Great Wall falling, where they actually divided Germany in half, and Russia took half, and they took all these other countries, including Ukraine, and incorporated them into the USSR. And for decades, we had this horrible Cold War and an arms race, and we were always under the threat of nuclear attack by Russia, by USSR. So after Russia falls apart, after USSR falls apart, Ukraine becomes its own nation again, where it was before. And they wanted to be their own nation. And there was this little shipping area called Crimea. And we have fought the Crimean Peninsula under multiple decades, under multiple generations. But Ukraine, this was part of their sovereign territory. And then Russia, the new Russia under Putin, marched in right around the time we had the last Winter Olympics and took it. They just took it. They killed the Ukrainian soldiers in the streets and just took Crimea back. So the Ukraine
It was the first invasion of one country by another.
Right. Well, in Russia, Russia had invaded Afghanistan before we did. So that was their first.
But for years and years and years.
Yeah. So anyway, so here's Ukraine, and they come to the U.S. and they go, help us, please. Our people are dying. Help us. So for multiple presidents, since Ronald Reagan was in office, we have been helping Ukraine with guidance, with military might, with policy.
Now, keep in mind, we have not just been helping Ukraine. Exactly what Heidi said. All the background she gave you plays into why it is in the United States' national interest to be involved in areas like Ukraine.
Right.
To protect from the advancement of
Russia. We don't want Russia to be...
Or to dictatorial, to keep the balance in the world fairly even, basically.
The last thing we want, Marie, is to live under the terror again we had during the Cold War, where all of us, maybe before some of you were born. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're waiting. I mean, now kids are dealing with school shootings. We used to deal with what if there's a nuclear attack and they'd make us get under our desks because Russia was coming. My dad used to arm our household in case Russia was coming. This is the truth that we lived under and why we need to fight for Ukraine. So all of this comes about when our president decides that he's got a greater purpose for our ambassadors, for our diplomats, than just issuing or working on the policy that we've already established. He decides to do something called a quid pro quo, or something for nothing, or extortion, something for something else. I'm sorry, I said something for nothing, but it was something for something else, and made their military stipend budget that Congress already passed contingent on Ukraine doing a favor specifically for Donald Trump. Specifically.
Now, exactly what Heidi said. We need to push the understanding of the timeline.
Yeah.
Now, we're learning new things here and there, but it's a bit like watching a Quantum Leap, or
Yes.
a show where you jump back and forth in time. And that's okay, but the average person will have a harder time following and give the other side, the Republicans, an opportunity to confuse people.
Right.
So we'll make sure that at the end we run through the timeline.
Right.
But timeline is extremely important here. So as we're going through the first set of testimony, the Republicans are claiming that nobody heard it firsthand, that there was, they got the aid anyway, and they brought in Joe Biden and Hunter Biden to try to distract. They didn't have a strong defense in any other capacity. So their tactics were distract. Yeah,
it was mostly distract and confuse people, because this is being held like a trial where we have counsel, a lawyer for the Republican side and a lawyer for the Democratic side. Now listen, ladies and gentlemen, we should be having a lawyer for the United States, not political parties. This is beyond political parties, but yet this is what our president has made it into. And his key players in this are Jim Jordan and Devin Nunes, who I don't know what
Daniel Radcliffe is getting.
Oh my gosh! Listening to them talk, and one of the statements were, we need to hear from these people directly, including the whistleblower.
This is brilliant. So, Jim Jordan was
who's an idiot
about how we need, none of this is relevant. It's not the we need the whistleblower, blah blah blah. And it was Representative Peter Welsh said, well, yeah, I agree. The person who started it all should come in and testify. President Trump is welcome to take a seat right there.
Anytime.
It was brilliant.
Brilliant.
That was like a wonderful moment in the hearing.
Because you have to understand that the reason that we don't have direct testimony is that the White House, specifically Donald John Trump, has blocked people from testifying in the they are not allowed to be deposed, they're not allowed to be questioned, they're not allowed to appear in front of Congress, which is obstruction of justice in and of itself, which is an impeachable offense, and we haven't even gotten to that yet. So here's a couple takeaways also, is that he threatened a crime. He tried to extort one thing for another. That's extortion. They keep calling it quid pro quo, but it is extortion. And the fact that he didn't get away from away with the crime doesn't mean that he is guiltless, because you can attempt murder and still go to prison. You can attempt extortion and still go to prison. It's still a crime.
Conspiracy to commit. That's an absolutely prosecutable crime.
If any of us did it, us did it, we'd be in prison right now.
Right.
So,
yeah. And so another big takeaway from this was that it became pretty clear through the testimony that Rudy Giuliani, who we haven't heard a lot from, is going to be taking a bigger role in this.
Have you noticed?
I promise.
Yeah.
DJT is going to cut him loose, and the Republicans are going to throw him under the bus.
I don't know where he is.
Was a rogue actor.
Yes.
Saying that he took it upon himself to do this, as long as it's removed from the president. But we have to remember, again, we go back to the timeline, which we're going to go through at the end of this. And it is so critical that we keep paying attention and adding to this timeline.
Well, and the thing is that I've noticed lately where Giuliani was everywhere 2 weeks ago, he's nowhere to be found. In fact, they had Kellyanne Conway out.
I just looked up his Twitter. Okay, because we all know he loves being on Twitter.
He does.
And there have been a couple of other times.
Even though he's locked himself out of his phone.
Well, okay, in this presidency, there have been a couple of other times where Giuliani has sort of gone underground and gone quiet, and then will be brought out when necessary.
Right.
And this, he's laying low for the most part, not appearances and all that, but he was tweeting yesterday.
Oh, was he?
He tweeted like 3 things, and it was related to what was going on without crossing a line. But of course, supportive of.
You wonder if he wrote those tweets or if somebody has his phone right now.
Yeah.
You know, because that happens sometimes to these guys. All of a sudden, their tweets are very mechanical, very concise.
It was still Rudy-esque.
Was it Rudy-esque?
But it wasn't as in your face,
I'm Rudy Giuliani,
I can
America's
do whatever
mayor.
the hell I want, right? Right? Yeah.
You know, Rudy, you should have just retired when you retired, because when you were America's mayor, you were cool. Now you're just a treasonous warthog. So, so as we go on, you know, and listen to the testimony that these men gave, and they kept going on and on and on, reiterating their points. And Jim Jordan and Devin Nunes would come up with some ridiculous, contrived statement, and they would just look at him and shake their heads and go, I don't have any knowledge of that, because they would just make stuff up and say, and you knew that, and they're like, nope, didn't know that. You know, it was just ridiculously stupid stuff. And if you don't know anything about Jim Jordan and Devin Nunes, who's currently suing his cow or something, you should learn. So,
oh my goodness, I'm sorry. That was good.
Yeah,
that was really good.
Well, so as we go on with this, we have. You know, this is must-watch TV. Your job as a concerned citizen is to know this stuff, and if you can't, tune in to us again, because Friday.
Do another recap after Marie Ivanovich.
Yeah, Friday it all continues. But here's a couple things that I took away from this, because you know the Republican pundits were out in force, and Kellyanne Conway, who I don't know what rock she slithers out from underneath of each morning, but
George Conway was on MSNBC. George Conway, Kellyanne's husband, was on Leaning Left, MSNBC, on a panel talking about why he should be impeached. It was hilarious. While Kellyanne is on Fox, oh my gosh, how do they even survive in the same household?
Kellyanne is on Fox talking about other violations of the emoluments clause as if they are a good thing, and we should all stop at Trump properties, and we should all get gas up in Scotland to keep that airport open. And I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, and it was just a blurb that was on Twitter, and I thought, why do they let her talk? All she's doing is saying, yes, he commits emoluments clause violations, and yes, he's going to do it again, and he's going to keep doing it.
Okay. So that brings me to an article that was in, I believe, Vox. I posted it. And what it is it starts with Mein Kampf. And it talks about, and he was absolutely right, people will believe the bigger lies much more easily than they will believe the small lies. Because as people, we know we all tell little white lies, and they, slide. So when you hear some, you think, oh, it could or couldn't be. But most people would never lie about something so large. Yeah. So when there is something that is just gigantic in front of them, they actually can't believe it would be a lie. It's discongruous with how their brain functions,
right.
how their entire everything works, and what's going on, because we're programmed to think anything major is truthful.
That's part of staring at car wrecks and train wrecks, right? You can't take your eyes off of it. You can't take your eyes off of this huge convoluted lie, but you need to. Or you need to make fun of it so that it doesn't stick in your brain. Because the one thing I was thinking of today, I read this thing on NBC that said, well, it's totally lacked pizzazz, those impeachment hearings. Lacked pizzazz. I'm like, what do you want, a song and dance act? What an irresponsible piece of journalism that was,
and
NBC.
And it goes back to, what I think is very interesting, is it goes back to what is news and what isn't news.
Yeah.
Look at Newsmax. Newsmax has news in the title. It's the new version of Fox. It's the backup when Fox realizes they're screwed and have to move toward, oh shit, he's...
Yep.
So...
They're preparing.
Oh, I said the S word too. My bad. Yeah, they're preparing. And what's funny is that there's no federal requirement like in European countries to declare whether they are news or not.
Right.
And even regular shows will claim to be news, but they're technically pundits. So again, we go back to people
like us. We're pundits. We're not journalists, right?
Well,
kind of. We try to deliver just facts, but there's a lot of opinion mixed in.
Opinion, but we're very clear when we talk about it being opinion as
right,
opposed to being fact.
Right. And here's the other thing. If we don't get on top of this is going to come and smack us right between the eyes for the 2020 elections, which is exactly what the Republicans want. They want this to be such a distraction that we take our eye off of all the meddling from foreign countries in our 2020 election, and all of a sudden, boom, we're right back where we started from.
You think so?
Oh. I know so. Come on.
See, no, I mean that's a very valid point, but I don't know if that's a conscious thought process for them. I think that they would be far more concerned about these hearings and them having to justify their answers. Like the show we did about senators, where we talked about those that were ducking him and not using him because they knew that they were going to be. So I think it's the flip of that. I think they need this to go away. They need it to be changed quickly so that they can go on to the elections. Because if it drags on...
Well, Murray, Mitch McConnell is sitting on how much legislation to help protect our 2020.
Absolutely.
So,
but I'm not saying, I don't think it's, well, you could be right. It could be.
It's anything to distract. And then you have Lindsey Graham out there saying, I'm really over this impeachment proceedings. I'm really over it. Really, Lindsey? You're over doing the right thing to protect your country? Lindsey Graham, I don't know what Donald Trump has on you in some closet somewhere in the secret server, but apparently it's scary enough that you will forfeit your country and your democracy for it.
And again, we go to, I don't know if it's Donald Trump or if it's some other larger entity, which we know.
Yeah.
So another fact we need to understand is that there was never any evidence or even concern or question of Ukraine interfering with the 2016 election.
Right.
That was all made up. Russia did interfere and was a major player and is planning to do it again. And Mitch McConnell is sitting on legislation to help that.
Well, and I think that bears repeating, Murray, is that all of these things about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Ukraine were completely debunked. There's no truth behind these things at all. The fact that the Republican Party keeps bringing them up doesn't mean that they're true. Ukraine already did an investigation and found out that there was nothing wrong. Yeah, Hunter Biden had a very high-paying job. Very high-paying job.
And let's not talk about getting paid a lot of money and having no experience, a.k.a. the entire Trump family.
Right. So because he had this high-paying job with this oil company, the Ukrainian government investigated it at the time and shortly thereafter and found that there was nothing wrong with what he did with having that job.
And the Republicans are convoluting that with Joe Biden telling the president of Ukraine at the time, not Zelensky, the past president of Ukraine, that if he did not get rid of a prosecutor, that
It was so
they
corrupt.
would lose aid.
Right.
So the Republicans are conflating the two issues.
And they have
They're
nothing to
trying
do with one
tie
another.
it together, and there's no connection. It was the State Department policy. It was the policy of the United States. It was agreed upon by the legislative branch, the judicial branch. Everybody was all in favor of this plan.
For
and
diplomacy.
He was executing the plan for diplomacy
Right.
with a corrupt prosecutor trying to work on corruption. And it's very frustrating. That's why this timeline is going to be so important for everyone to understand what is really going on.
Right. And it's really important for you to discount these claims against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and against Ukrainian influence in the 2016
and against
election.
Coming Tomorrow, Marie Yovanovitch, and against the multiple award-winning Purple Heart, Silver Cross, infantry, fifth graduating West Point Vietnam vet, career professional that they were trying to slander.
We have such amazing people in or had such amazing people at the point of diplomacy across the world, and our president has then stepped up and made it. And they are cushy jobs, and they're all from rewards for, for being a person that they like. But our president has turned it into just a complete farce. He's replaced our diplomats, our ambassadors, with people who are just wildly unqualified.
I still would like to see these. I know that the Democrats are focusing on Ukraine.
Yes.
They're focusing on the quid pro quo that occurred. Rudy Giuliani's name was brought up.
Yes. And not in a good way.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
But they haven't deposed him. They haven't subpoenaed him.
Right.
They haven't.
Well,
and so my curiosity is, okay, if this argument doesn't work, why wouldn't you say that here is the President of the United States who has a black ops secret agenda?
Right. Talk about deep state.
Somebody, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that might make things more convoluted, but
Well,
again,
here's the thing with Giuliani is that the White House has blocked direct depositions from anybody with direct contact, and I think what they're trying to do is establish a case to subpoena,
criminal case, and then be able to pull
subpoena.
him in.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think that's where they're at. And I am not a lawyer.
Neither am I.
Never read law.
Never played one on TV.
No. So I know a few that were in the garden club together, but I don't. And we don't talk about law. We talk about petunias and roses and things. So here's something, a real important takeaway, is that when we have a president that is operating through backdoor channels, because that's something that was really established yesterday, is that there was a main channel, the channel that everybody knows about, that's above board, that is out there for the world to see, and then Donald Trump put in this one that's in this super secret server that's done in code words, that has other people working for Donald Trump as a pseudo ambassadors to make sure that different countries toe the line. So there's this normal channel of diplomacy and then this back channel. And the back channel, the people who are the ambassadors, the legit ambassadors weren't aware of it. And then when they became aware of it, they're like, wait a minute, this isn't how we do diplomacy in the United States. We do everything right out there where everybody can see it. So let's go over that timeline then, Murray, so we can start wrapping this up.
Absolutely. So there was a different government in place in Ukraine.
Right.
And that was one that Donald John Trump had been working with or had
for financial reasons for his businesses, part of the emoluments clause.
Ta-da! So the ambassador there was Marie Yovanovitch. She's a career ambassador. She'll be testifying tomorrow.
Wait, they had a different president too that was
right,
very...
that's what I meant. An entirely different government rather than...
That was very Russia-friendly and that was very corrupt. And the people of Ukraine voted him out of office, and instead got their new president, who was a stand-up comedian, but their new president who was going to clean up corruption. He's the current president, and his name, what is his name? Zelensky, sorry. I just had a complete mind blank. But so they brought Zelensky in. The people voted him in overwhelmingly. It was a mandate. It was a landslide. So a legit landslide.
So now, okay, let's hold.
Okay,
jump
so
the
let's
timeline.
go. Yeah.
Okay. So the elections were occurring, and as the elections are occurring, there is a campaign to move Marie Yovanovitch, who was the ambassador to the Ukraine for many years, away. Which makes sense if you think about it. Here's an old regime.
Yeah.
Here's somebody who knows all the ins and outs, all the tricks, would be able to work immediately with the new person.
Right.
And they wanted to remove that obstacle.
Right.
So they started a campaign. The president recalled her. The election happened. Now, there's a couple of months between the election actually happening and the government taking office. Zelensky taking office. Because they build a whole separate government. Right.
It's a peaceful transference of power, which is exactly what we do here in the United States.
Right. So during this time, Zelensky had asked the ambassadors to arrange a chance to meet the president.
Right.
Knowing that the policy of the United States has always been to push back on Russian aggression, push back on corruption. And that's how he won his mandate. That's how he came in. And he was banking on that. Although I'm not sure how, knowing that the last government was very tight with Russia and John Trump and stuff. But anyway, point being, so he came in, and being able to maintain his borders and keep his country safe. Is extremely important. Having a meeting with the president in the White House gives validity to
his presidency.
Right. It gives him more strength when negotiating and dealing with Russia.
Because they're already fighting this war over the Crimean territory, the Crimean Peninsula. So this is already going on while Zelensky is running for office and elected.
Wow. We need a whole show on this.
I know.
Secondary. All right. So we won't go too far here, but boy, do I have some connections here. So then he takes office. They had the federal government had our legislative body had approved the sale of Javelin missiles, and it's not giving it to them. The sale of them to protect against the advancement of Russia, and the Javelin missiles were withheld as well. And this happened this happened in between the time Zelensky took office.
Yes.
Or won the election and took office.
And you also have to remember that one thing that we left out is during this time when Zelensky came in and Trump was already in, Trump had also not enforced the sanctions we had against Russia.
For invading Crimea.
Yeah, he just would not enforce them. So
there are so many connections there, which is why
all roads lead back to Russia.
They do, and I know we're going a bit into the weeds, and we want to wrap it up here because we promised it'd be about a half hour. But what we have to understand is, okay, even if you couldn't be charged or it wasn't a crime to attempt to extort. Or to conspire to extort, even if that wasn't a crime. We are looking at personal interests driving the entire world order. And it is terrifying.
It is terrifying.
It's an individual choosing to have personal gain versus the safety and security of the nation. And we have to keep that in the forefront of our minds.
And the thing is that I'll just interject here. This isn't the only thing. This thing with Russia and Ukraine. We also are seeing this for personal gain in Turkey versus Syria, and people are dying.
That is what I was gonna say. Oh my God, we'll do an episode on the connections and why this is super important.
Here's what,
another day.
And I just have to have an in-your-face moment because I haven't had one for a while because we've been talking about fun stuff. But when we're willing to allow our president to not prevent, and in fact encourage the murder, the slaughter, the eradication of humanity in certain places where he has vested business interests, to honor people who are tyrants, dictators, to help them out, to take from
For
Syria,
financial gain.
for a financial gain,
or ego gain.
when
or,
when he just stroked the ego
and that's what we missed
Turkey.
yesterday during the hearing, was that Erdogan had visited the Trump and the White
Erdogan
House.
came to the United States.
Now remember,
Be outraged.
we talked about Zelensky wanting an meeting in the White House.
Right.
It was to give his government more validity, the power behind him. So by the White House granting Erdogan a visit, that shows that the
He
US
prefers
is behind,
dictators.
Yes, but that got zipped. So we will do.
Well,
we will do another episode about that.
Wait, but while he was there, Trump said, we're taking all of the Syrian oil for our own. We can't do that. We cannot take the Syrian oil for our own. That is a war crime. So, here's the problem. Sorry, I was so upset about that when I saw that, because to me that was like bigger than anything.
And that's a whole show. We don't want to.
I don't want to get
tried. Yes,
I'm getting all worked up.
So thanks again for tuning in. We will post a timeline of events and our major takeaways on our page. We'll put it up on our social media.
Keep paying attention.
Twitter, Facebook.
If we don't stop him now, more people will die.
And not even him. It's every
Russia.
president going forward. It changes the
Right.
entire face of what our nation stands for.
Exactly.
So, sorry, on that absolutely cheerful note, be sure to tune in. Please subscribe. When you subscribe, it lets places know that we're okay, we're cool. And then they're like, hey, they're cool. And then more people get to hear
And
our
retweet.
message.
Retweet this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
you
share.
have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.